During the 2 years that Michigan State University Group has been in Saigon, Vietnam, we've been able to observe a good deal of progress being made by the government and the people of Vietnam. Probably one of the most noticeable and striking changes has been the great increase in physical security that exists in the country. How well I remember the early months of our stay in Saigon with first of all, the Hotel Majestic riot, followed by a series of nighttime and daytime bombings that had all of us quite concerned. Then after this, a period of months during which the government was attempting to take over the countryside from the various sects that at least partially dominated in many of the provinces of the country. There was a period during which Americans, and for that matter Vietnamese, could not travel safely down some of the highways of the country, and armed guards were necessary. All of this has improved greatly, and now the physical security represents one of the outstanding elements of progress in the record of the past 2 years.
Well, I think as dramatic as the change in security that has taken place in Vietnam has been, I think we also have at least one other thing that's been almost equally dramatic. Certainly in the early days in 1954, even in 1955, everywhere you went in Vietnam, the refugees were present. In very, very large numbers, they crowded every kind of living facility. They crowded around the port. They slept on old ledges in public buildings. They occupied the Opera House. They put up temporary housing outside, and big boatloads and truckloads of them would be seen in Saigon. This presented a major crisis in the Vietnamese government, really, a major challenge, really, and the challenge has been met most effectively. Perhaps as effective a refugee program as has existed in Asia has taken place and taken shape and has been executed largely now, and the refugees have moved out into permanent locations. Land has been cleared and made available for them, and they are reasonably productive and will be fully productive within a year or two. Probably the government of Vietnam has had as healthy a program as any government in Asia in terms of refugees, and I think perhaps we ought to list a third area in which the government has made considerable progress in late months at least, and this is in the economic and social development area. This is a program just in its beginning now, but at any rate it's beginning to take shape in very encouraging fashion. And if the same lines are followed in this direction as have been followed in the first two areas we mentioned, namely security and refugees, I think we're in for very good days indeed in Vietnam.
I think another area of progress should be mentioned. Indeed, perhaps it's the most long-range and important of the various elements of progress. This is the area of general political development. We have had in Vietnam over the past few years a trend in the direction of the establishment of democratic institutions. And I think several high points might be mentioned in regards to this. The first, of course, would be the election in October of 1955, at which time President Ngo Dinh Diem came into authority legally and rightfully over former Emperor Bao Dai. In addition to this, the development of a constitution after a national election, which put into effect a constituent assembly. And then most recently, the beginning of this constitution in force, the inauguration of the president, and the opening of the General Assembly of Vietnam. All of these represent steps in a gradual trend toward democratic institutions, which of course many of us hope will become firmly established over the decades and years ahead.
I think one of the earlier steps in this sequence has had a broader significance. And that is when the President started to go out into the countryside and see the people and let the people see him. He traveled in the West, he traveled up north, he traveled in Saigon, of course, he traveled to the South, and everywhere he met the people of the country, he talked with them, found out their problems, and they gradually developed confidence in him, and I think he gradually developed a greater confidence as a leader of the country. And I think this has given the country as a whole a kind of stability, a kind of central force, a kind of vehicle for planning the future, which has been most useful and will be most valuable and stand Vietnam in good stead when or if it develops any special problems in the future.
The very attractive architecture of the palace is added to by the tropical vegetation. And here President Ngo Dinh Diem is receiving Dr. Wesley Fischel, our chief advisor, and you during the past visit to Saigon. The reception is always a warm one. Michigan State has a very close relationship to the President.
He speaks very freely and very frequently at great length. And these visits are always very educational for us because we learn much about the operation of his office and about the history of his country, about his personal experiences and plans in developing his government, and also his hopes, as far as we are concerned, in developing our own program.
Most of these discussions are held in French. President Diem does speak some English, but he, of course, is very fluent in the French language. The palace grounds are just as attractive as the palace itself. Well, that was one of many visits to the presidential palace.
Yes, I guess that's right, but very seriously, these visits to the palace, visits with other government officials, whomever we came in contact with in Vietnam, were really very educational for us. And all of us, I think, have brought back experiences and are bringing back experiences which we have profited greatly from and which enrich our own lives and enrich our own professional attitude and approaches to things.
Certainly our work with the government, and particularly our work in the presidency project, brought us into close contact with the problems of establishing a new executive office and a new set of staff services for a chief executive. It was a very challenging experience, and one which, of course, is not yet completed. I think we can identify several activities related to this kind of technical assistance endeavor. One of these was the continuing program that we maintained of research and consultantship and general work with the staff agencies within the executive office.
I can remember that we had only been in Vietnam a very short time when the President asked us to have a staff member, John Dorsey, do a rather exhaustive study of the office of the President to find out what each unit of the presidency might be doing at a particular time, what its workflow and workload was, and what could be done to reorganize and regroup these agencies, and perhaps pull other groups into the office of the President, and perhaps push some out.
And then shortly after the elections of October of 1955, he became extremely interested in getting this report as soon as possible.
Yes, there was quite a rush and a lot of work to get the thing shaped up in final fashion, and I think he paid quite a little attention to it in actually carrying out some of the reorganizations of the presidency in the fall of '55.
And of course we still are active as a technical assistance group in assisting the President to implement various of these recommendations. Now, another activity in connection with our presidency project has been the ad hoc type of activity where the President has requested Michigan State to develop particular studies or to make recommendations relative to a particular problem. For example, the question of economic control. This was something that was particularly bothersome about Tet time, the Chinese New Year time, when sugar would suddenly begin to disappear off the market as various forces in the economic picture tried to monopolize and profit, perhaps off the fact that there's a tremendous demand for these things.
This was a report that, well, at least two of our people worked on very thoroughly, Dr. John Hunter in economics, and I believe Mr. Shelby of our police group.
That's
also
right,
worked on
and
it.
Dorsey worked on this one also.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, you know, the job of chief executive of the country requires a lot of special ad hoc services, not only on the part of groups such as our own in Vietnam, but many Vietnamese work on these ad hoc problems, just as in our own presidency in Washington. President Eisenhower must have quite a wide variety of specialists who can come in and meet an emergency situation.
Of course, it was our objective in working with the Vietnamese to see them develop the staff services that would be necessary for President Ngo Dinh Diem or future presidents. And it was our constant effort to assist in developing a research bureau, a series of budget officers and advisors and such, so that the president could do his job more adequately. We
In
also
fact, he's appointed some people in charge of research.
very definitely so, and these men have been gradually fitting into his organization.
It's a much better staffed presidency than it was just a year ago, and has become increasingly more so as more manpower is made available and reorganization progressively takes place.
Even with the very real problems that still remain, we can note some of the steps that have been taken. Now, I think Michigan State Group's relationship with the President has also been based on our many other activities. The National Institute is responsible to the President, and of course we are active in relation to the National Institute, and similarly the various ministries with which we work bring us into contact not only with the ministers, but with the President when it comes to considering reorganization moves.
I would say that in general our relation with the President has helped us throughout our work in Vietnam. That is to say, because we have helped the President, because we have been of service to him, it has been easier to be of service elsewhere. People's initial suspicions of us, of course, are not great because they figure that if we are of help to the President, we can be of help to them. It certainly has aided us in acceptance, has made our work much more rapid and easier to do.
In fact, I'd say it would be an essential in a technical assistance program such as ours to have the confidence and the general cooperation of the high officials of the government. I think it is this rather firm basis of agreement that starts with the very outset of our program that has made our particular technical assistance effort the program it has been.
Yes, I think two things can be said about this in terms of key to success. First of all, of course, it's important to send people over to the country concerned with the right attitude. I think the attitude on the part of our people is most essential, most important. And secondly, the firm understanding and firm desire on the part of the local population, the officials in charge, to be committed to the idea that these people are coming over to help and that it would be useful and that there is something for these people to do. And these conditions have been very well met in Vietnam.
I think the overall progress of the past 2 years that we mentioned at the outset of our program has been particularly noticeable in the areas we mentioned as well as in the presidency generally.
Yes, I think that's right.
This very large gathering on the palace grounds is on the occasion of the victory of President Ngo Dinh Diem over former Emperor Bao Dai in the referendum that was held in October 1955. The many banners and the flags and the very large crowds that gathered were part of the festive occasion.
The balloting process was done in secret and was done was carried out with very fine procedures as a whole. And
it was very efficiently done, I think, throughout the whole city, wasn't it?
I think that's right, considering particularly that they had not had elections like this before. This was done very effectively and very orderly. There were no disturbances of any consequence in the city of Saigon. And of course, after the election results were announced, there were the usual parades and demonstrations.
This raising of the right hand while shouting in unison was an innovation that I had not seen in the United States at any time, and found it quite a shocker the first time I saw it and heard the shouting, which I might add was very soon after coming to Vietnam.
This is a kind of campaign poster during the event there, and shows Bao Dai with his bag of money and his cards, and obviously a very undesirable kind of candidate who is vacationing on the Riviera and spending the country's money.
Well, while the balloting and the actual election went off in a very orderly way, the actual campaign, of course, was very heavily one-sided in favor of President Diem. Here are some of the campaign posters that one saw throughout the whole city, throughout the whole country. They represented the pictures that actually appeared on the ballots.
Here is the president on one of his campaign tours, one of his tours of the country that preceded his campaign. He's visiting a village and meeting the village leaders and the crowd that came out to greet his entourage.
Well, our work with the president has been and continues to be one of the more interesting of the activities of the Michigan State Group. On the other hand, many of the things that we do with the Executive Office of the President is really a part of the general consultative work that Michigan State has engaged in